Picture this. It's ancient China, somewhere in the late spring and autumn period sliding into the Warring States era. A ruler is staring at a map lit by oil lamps, but what's really keeping him awake isn't romance or glory. It's the ledger. Grain stores, labor quotas, horses, transport carts, tax revenues, the cost of feeding thousands of mouths that produce nothing while they march. The choice in front of him looks military, but it's secretly financial. This is the world that produced a slim, sharp text we now call the Art of War, traditionally linked to Sun Tzu. Historians debate the details, whether there was one author, whether parts were compiled later, but the pressures it describes fit the era. These were rival states building early bureaucracies, funding large armies, managing supply lines, and trying not to collapse under the weight of their own spending. Even if you don't care about battles, the art of war is packed with finance thinking. It treats war as an investment decision with ugly downside risk. It's obsessed with burn rate, runway, and the difference between an expensive win and a cheap win. It's basically saying, yes, strategy matters, but the balance sheet decides how long you're allowed to have a strategy. In modern life, Sun Tzu lines get turned into motivation. Be clever, be decisive, win. But the original context is more sober. A prolonged campaign didn't just mean more fighting. It meant drained treasuries, higher taxes, farmers pulled off fields, and legitimacy bleeding out as granaries emptied. A ruler could win a battle and still lose the state financially. That's not a metaphor. That's an insolvency problem. And every extra week quietly compounds the cost before anyone notices. So if Sun Tzu had a headline, it would be, "The fastest way to lose is to underestimate the cost of staying in the game." Think about how modern companies fail. Most don't die because they had no ideas. They die because they run out of runway. They bleed cash while waiting for the big win. Now rewind to the Warring States. Replace runway with grain and burn rate with supply wagons, and you've basically walked into Sun Tzu's office hours. He keeps returning to one big principle. The best victory is the one that preserves resources, not just lives, but the state's productive capacity. In modern finance language, he's obsessed with protecting principle while still pursuing upside. He's warning you about hidden costs that don't show up in the initial plan: repairs, spoilage, morale collapse, political backlash, and the opportunity cost of everything you could have built if you weren't funding a campaign. Then there's information, which in Sun Tzu's world is not a bonus. It's an asset that reduces uncertainty. It's like paying less for the same result, because you understand the market. If you can forecast accurately your opponent's capacity, your own constraints, timing, and terrain, you avoid overpaying for outcomes. You don't throw resources into bad trades. You don't chase sunk costs just because you started. Which raises a fun question. When you're being strategic in life, are you actually doing strategy, or are you just spending more? Sun Tzu frames uncertainty as expensive. He treats chaos as a tax, and he looks at any plan that relies on luck and calls it what it is, a gamble with the state's capital. That's why this topic belongs on a finance channel. Sun Tzu isn't teaching you how to swing a sword. He's teaching you how to manage scarcity under pressure, how to choose battles you can afford, how to win by shifting incentives instead of paying full price in brute force. In this video, we're going to follow that sleepless ruler and unpack the money brain hiding inside Sun Tzu's most famous ideas. Why he treats time as a cost, why he hates long campaigns like a CFO hates prolonged cash burn, why he prioritizes positioning over effort, and why he believes the greatest advantage is making the other side spend more than you do. By the end, you'll start hearing those famous quotes differently. Not as tough guy wisdom, but as a practical guide to one of the hardest problems in finance: surviving long enough to win. Now zoom back into that lamplit map room, because this is where Sun Tzu's thinking stops being ancient wisdom and starts sounding like a finance meeting. The first thing he does is strip away the romance. War, in his world, is not a heroic movie scene. It's a state-funded project with a terrifying monthly bill. Armies don't live on vibes. They live on grain, equipment maintenance, transport, pay replacements, and the quiet costs nobody budgets for: spoilage, illness, animals dying, roads turning into mud, couriers getting delayed, officials skimming, local resentment boiling over. Every day a campaign drags on. The bill keeps running whether you feel progress or not. So when Sun Tzu keeps warning against prolonged warfare, he's making a point that any founder, investor, or even a household budgeter would recognize. Time is expensive, and uncertainty makes it more expensive. Because here's the real trap. A long campaign doesn't just cost more. It changes incentives inside your own system. Taxes rise. Merchants get squeezed. Farmers get pulled from fields. Prices can spike. People who were neutral start getting angry. And now you're fighting two battles at once. The external conflict and the internal cash flow crisis. This is why Sun Tzu treats speed like a form of savings. Not reckless speed, not move fast and break things, but decisive, planned speed. Speed that reduces your exposure to the compounding costs of staying in the field. And notice how modern that feels. How many people have watched a project drift for months because we've already started, only to realize the drifting itself is the most expensive part? Sun Tzu would call that a slow leak in the treasury. He also has a sharp eye for what we'd call supply chain reality. If your entire plan depends on dragging resources from far away, you are pricing your own strategy at premium rates. Transport is costly. Guarding transport is costly. Losing transport is catastrophic. That's why he talks about feeding off the land, using what's available locally, and minimizing strain on your own base. The moral side of that is debated and context-dependent, but the financial principle is clear. The farther your supply line stretches, the more fragile your entire operation becomes. In other words, he's telling you, your strategy is only as strong as your logistics. Your big vision is only as real as your ability to fund it without collapsing. Then comes one of his most underrated finance ideas. Winning isn't just about gaining something, it's about not paying more than it's worth. That sounds obvious until you watch people overpay every day. Sun Tzu hates expensive wins. He's suspicious of any victory that burns through your best people, empties your stores, and leaves you too weak to handle what comes next. That's basically saying, don't confuse revenue with profit. Don't confuse we got it with it was worth it. Think about a state trying to take a valuable city during the Warring States period. Let's imagine the city sits on a trade route and has good farmland nearby. It's a tempting prize. The loudest voices in a room say, take it by force, prove strength, make an example. It sounds bold. It also sounds expensive. Sun Tzu's mindset would push a different set of questions. How long would it take? What does each extra week cost? What happens to your stores back home? What happens if another rival sees you tied up and attacks somewhere else? What if the city's value is real, but the price you pay to acquire it destroys your ability to benefit from it? So instead of the most direct route, you focus on the cheapest route to the outcome. You pressure the city's allies. You disrupt the trade flow that funds its defenses. You offer terms that split its leadership. You create a situation where surrender becomes the best financial choice for them. And if the city opens its gates quickly, you gain the asset without paying a long, compounding cost. That's the kind of financial genius most people miss. Sun Tzu is constantly looking for ways to change the other side's incentives so you don't have to buy the outcome at full price. This is also why he loves the idea of winning without fighting, which people sometimes treat like a mystical quote. It's not mystical, it's ROI. If your goal can be achieved through positioning, persuasion, alliance building, and credible strength, rather than costly direct conflict, then you've preserved your capital for the next problem. And in his world, there's always a next problem. Another big pillar is information. Sun Tzu treats information like an investment that reduces risk. In finance terms, he's telling you to pay for due diligence. Not because it guarantees success, but because it prevents you from making stupid, expensive bets. When you don't know the terrain, you misprice the task. When you don't understand your opponent, you overreact or underreact. When you don't understand yourself, your true capacity, morale, stores leadership, you build plans that look great on paper and collapse under pressure. It's also why he's obsessed with being unpredictable. Unpredictability isn't just psychological, it's economic. If the other side can predict you, they can prepare efficiently. They can defend cheaply. They can make you spend more to get less. But if they can't predict you, they have to keep resources spread out, waiting for multiple possibilities. Their costs go up. Your costs go down. That's not just strategy. That's cost engineering. And here's a very modern takeaway. You don't always need more effort. You need better positioning, better information, better timing, better trade-offs. Because Sun Tzu's world runs on scarcity. Even powerful states have limits. That's why he keeps circling back to the same warning. Don't get dragged into a shape of conflict that benefits your opponent. If the opponent wants you in a long campaign, that's probably because they think time favors them, or because they think you can't afford it. If they want you to attack a strong position head-on, that's probably because it forces you to pay the highest price. If they want you emotional, impulsive, and rushed, that's because emotional decision-making is expensive decision-making. And you can feel the stakes rising here. Because the more you spend, the fewer options you have. When your treasury is full, you have choices, diplomacy, incentives, targeted action, patience. When your treasury is empty, you have one choice, desperation. Sun Tzu is trying to keep you out of desperation. Now let's pull this into everyday life, because the same patterns show up in smaller, friendlier ways. Think about your personal budget like a tiny treasury. Your salary is the tax base. Your savings is the grain store. Your time and energy are your logistics. And suddenly Sun Tzu's advice stops being ancient and starts being uncomfortably relatable. Ever said yes to something that looked valuable, but the hidden costs wrecked you? The commute, the stress, the time drain, the follow-up expenses? That's an expensive win. Ever stayed in a failing plan because I've already invested so much? That's a prolonged campaign. Ever bought something quickly because you didn't do the research, then paid again to fix the mistake? That's skipping intelligence. Even in business, it's the same. A startup can win a big client and lose money fulfilling the contract. A creator can chase growth and burn out because the content schedule is a long campaign with no resupply. A freelancer can accept a project that pays well, but costs their sanity and kills their ability to take better work next month. So the Sun Tzu question becomes, are you choosing battles that strengthen your position or battles that drain your treasury? Because the quiet genius here isn't aggression. It's disciplined spending. It's treating time like money, treating information like insurance, and treating victory as something you measure after the costs are paid, not before. And honestly, once you start seeing it that way, it's hard to unsee. We started this story in a lamplit room with a ruler staring at a map. But if we're being honest, that map isn't just a map. It's a budget. It's a timeline. It's a list of promises the state has made to its own people. And Sun Tzu, whatever you believe about the exact authorship, is basically whispering the same uncomfortable truth across the centuries. You don't get unlimited attempts at winning. You get a runway. When a runway ends, the strategy ends. And that's what makes his financial genius feel so modern. He's not telling you to be ruthless for the sake of it. He's telling you to stop confusing motion with progress and stop paying premium prices for outcomes you could earn through better positioning. Because the real flex in his worldview isn't fighting harder. It's making the outcome cheaper. If you take anything from this video, let it be this. Sun Tzu treats time like an interest rate. The longer you stay stuck, the more you pay. Not always in cash, sometimes in morale, credibility, health, opportunity, trust, attention. But you pay. And the scariest part is that you often don't notice the bill until you're already deep in it. That's why he keeps steering you toward clarity. Know your capacity. Know your constraints. Know your environment. Reduce uncertainty. Move with purpose. Don't get pulled into the kind of conflict that drains you. Now, here's where I want to drop the line that's going to make some people uncomfortable. It's controversial, but it fits Sun Tzu's logic, and it's absolutely worth thinking about. Sometimes the most ethical choice is not the most fair fight. Sometimes the most responsible choice is to avoid the fight entirely and win through leverage. Let's sit with that for a second. Because a lot of us have been raised on the idea that fairness is a virtue in conflict. that you should meet people on equal terms, take the hit, prove you can endure, show character by suffering through it. And sure, there's a place for grit. There's a place for standing your ground. But Sun Tzu would look at many of our fair fights and say, politely, "You are volunteering to overpay." He'd ask, why would you choose the most expensive route to a goal you claim is important? Why would you pick the option that drains your savings, your energy, your time, your reputation, your relationships, just so you can feel like you did it the hard way? In finance terms, fairness is not a metric. Sustainability is. This doesn't mean you cheat. It doesn't mean you harm people. It doesn't mean you throw away principles. It means you stop worshiping struggle as proof of virtue. You stop treating suffering as a receipt that guarantees you deserve the outcome. You start asking a more adult question. What choice protects my resources and keeps me capable tomorrow? Because that's what Sun Tzu is really protecting, your ability to keep operating. And if that statement bugs you, good. It's supposed to. Not because discomfort is the goal, but because it exposes a pattern. We often sacrifice our future strength to satisfy a present emotion. Pride, ego, the desire to look brave, the need to teach them a lesson, the urge to prove something. Sun Tzu would call that expensive emotion. He'd tell you to move like an investor, not like a gambler. Investors don't take every deal. They pick the deals that match their capital, their timeline, their risk tolerance, and their edge. Gamblers chase outcomes because they want the thrill of being right. And if we're honest, a lot of modern conflict is basically gambling with your personal treasury. You can see it in money decisions. People go broke trying to look successful. People overextend to keep up appearances. People lock themselves into high-burn lifestyles and call it ambition. They win the image and lose the balance sheet. You can see it in careers. People take roles that pay well, but quietly destroy their health, their relationships, and their long-term growth. It's a victory that costs too much. It's a city you captured, but can't afford to govern. You can see in business. A company wins market share with discounts and ad spend, but the unit economics never work. It looks like dominance. It's actually a prolonged campaign with no resupply. And you can see it in relationships and social dynamics. People stay in draining situations because they don't want to be seen as quitting. They fight battles that don't build anything. They burn months and years trying to get justice from people who aren't even playing the same game. This is where Sun Tzu feels almost gentle in a strange way. Because he's saying, preserve yourself, preserve the state, preserve the system that funds your life, preserve the base that lets you keep making choices. And the more you look at it through a finance lens, the more you realize he's not celebrating conflict. He's trying to minimize its cost. So the conclusion of this story isn't be more aggressive. It's be more precise. Be precise about what you want. Be precise about what it costs. Be precise about what you can afford. Be precise about the trade-offs you're making when you choose the harder route. And when you find yourself tempted by a dramatic, expensive win, ask the Sun Tzu question. What would it look like to get the same outcome with less burn? Now I want to hear from you, because this is where it gets interesting. Have you ever had a moment where you realized you were in a prolonged campaign in your own life, spending time, money, or energy on something that was quietly draining you? Or maybe you found a way to win without the fight, to change the incentives, to reposition, and suddenly the outcome became cheaper? Drop your experience in the comments. Keep it real, keep it respectful. And if you're comfortable, share what the hidden cost was that you didn't see at first. I read the comments, and I'll reach out and respond to as many as I can. Because honestly, your stories help shape what we explore next. And if there's one thing Sun Tzu would probably agree with, it's this. The best lessons aren't the ones you memorize. They're the ones you paid for and never want to pay for again. So let's learn together before the bill comes due.